Hi all, good afternoon. Welcome to the FCI webinar on learning and development in clinical informatics. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll be shortly handing you over to the FCI project manager, Lindsay Turner, who will be introducing today's session. But before I do, I'd just like to go through a bit of housekeeping with you. Could I bring your attention to the next slide? So could I ask you all to please remain muted throughout the presentation? We do have a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to unmute then and ask any questions that you may have. You can also pop your questions into the chat box. And next, can you, no, just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded and will be the recording will be available on the FCI website and YouTube channel. And lastly, we do have an evaluation form, which will be popped into the chat box. If you do have a few moments to complete it, that would be great. I would now like to hand you over to Lindsay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shalane. Hope you can all hear me as well. As Shalane said, I'm the project manager at the faculty, and yeah, we're really looking forward to this for this session today. The session is going to be chaired by Tejas Shah, and I just wanted to start off and to give an introduction to the session to explain kind of the context behind it and why I decided to put this session together. So, Shalane, if you could go on to the next slide. So, as I say, the context behind this was that I saw a couple of blogs that had been published, one by Gurkaran Samra and one by Ramandeep, Kaur, who are presenting today, and both of them explaining their development, their journeys through clinical informatics and what they'd learned, what their experiences were, and how they were kind of progressing their own careers. And I mean, I have a background in education as well, and that's why it kind of piqued my interest. But also, I've been leading on some work with the faculty's core competency framework and a working group we had to think about how we were going to implement that. So it was very much on my radar of how the faculty needed to support our members and give them the opportunity to think about how they could gain experience in the core competencies that we were presenting through the competency framework. And the pictures on this slide here were really just to emphasize how important it is for us to learn from each other and how valuable sort of informal ways of gaining that experience are. Hence why I started by mentioning that I'd seen a couple of blogs being published and then that led to this piece of work. If you go on to the next slide, Shalane, I was also, we did a project recently with the faculty working with HDR UK, and that was to look at how one of their programs called the Better Care program, how they share knowledge and know-how, and how they could go about doing that more effectively. And this is just a quick capture of one of the slides that I presented on that project. And again, that kind of gave me the motivation to put this webinar together today. If you look at down the arrows on the left, they're just ways that we identified through that project that sharing of know-how can be enabled. So it's about senior colleagues supporting their junior colleagues and kind of acting as a role model to help them to share, needing to have that appetite and that interest in learning and sharing of knowledge, having someone who can act as a facilitator and make links. And I like to think that this webinar today is one way of doing that, someone who could see that there's the opportunity for people who have valuable knowledge and experience to share it with others, and also having peer endorsement, so seeing others share and learn from each other and seeing how that can be valuable, and also needing lots of ways to learn and share, so that because different people have different preferences. So again, I think that hopefully will help you to understand why we wanted to put this webinar on for you today. And then lastly, just going on to my final little introductory slide. So there are many routes to becoming a clinical informatician, as you'll likely know, and it's some of the work that the faculty is doing to look at what some of those routes are and to support people to think about how they can progress as a clinical informatician. We have 3 speakers today who will describe their journeys, and you'll see that they're very varied, but so you hopefully can learn from their experience and help you to think about how you want to take forward your own journey. So I'm going to hand over now to Tejal, who's chairing the session for us. I worked with Tejal in the Competency Framework Working Group, and she has a wealth of experience in training and education for clinical informaticians. So she'll be really in a great position to chair this session today. So thank you very much, Tejal.
Thanks, Lindsay, and hello everyone. Thanks for joining. So as Lindsay very nicely introduced the session, we have brought this together so that you all get an opportunity to know from each other, to learn from each other. We have 3 amazing speakers today, and they are here to share some of the amazing and exciting journeys in the world of clinical informatics, as you'll hear from each of them. And as Lindsay just mentioned, each one comes with a very unique perspective and very unique experience. So hopefully this will help you think about your own next steps as a clinical informatician, and you will know that there's just not one way to do this. And there are a lot of resources and support available for your own professional development. So we'll proceed from here, and you'll hear from all the speakers now. As Shalane mentioned, please pop your questions into the chat box and we'll be able to pick them up towards the end. So our first speaker today here is Dr. Gurkaran Samra. He's a consultant in acute medicine and is also a clinical informatician at Blackpool Teaching Hospital. He's a member at the FCI, and he has an amazing array of tips and resources to share with us. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Gurkaran. Hello, Gurkaran.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Tejal. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, my name is Gurkaran Samra. The hashtag "Hello, my name" is more than just a tagline. It's Dr. Kate Granger's legacy. It's about values of sensitive communication, being mindful of the small things, and always keeping the patient at the center and focus of everything that we do. It's these values that I try to follow as part of my job as a consultant in acute medicine and as a clinical informatician. And these values have helped shape my learning and development in clinical informatics. Through this presentation, I'd like to talk to you about the why, how, and what of my learning and development journey in clinical informatics. Starting with the why and starting with Akov's data hierarchy. So over the last decade, through my journey, I've been able to understand and be part of various audits, quality improvement projects, data science exercises, service redesign. And along the way, I've come to appreciate the power of data, and it's how data translates into wisdom and how that influences practice. That's the nirvana that we're all after, and it's that nirvana that, or the search for wisdom, that inspired me to progress my learning and development in clinical informatics. Sticking with the theme of nirvana and rock music, I was inspired by an interview with Wachter, which talked about the rock star statuses that clinical informaticians will achieve in the future. I found that to be quite exciting. Sticking with the theme of nirvana, Porter, in his work about the strategy that will fix healthcare, talks about how information technology will play a vital role in shaping the future of healthcare, in delivering value in the services that we provide for patients we care for. Another rock star that I found to be very inspirational and have been fortunate to be able to attend some of his talks was Russ Branzell. You may have heard his talks where he talks about the transition and the evolution of the CIO from CIO 2.0 to CIO 3.0 and the skills that the next generation of CIOs and leaders in informatics require to do the job. So I thought about CIO 3.0 and the skills, and that has helped influence my learning agenda. Lastly, on why. So over the last decade, I've had a good grounding in clinical medicine. Over the years, I've been more involved in information technology projects in health informatics at my trust, and have become to understand the context of clinical and information technology in the wider healthcare system. So returning to the why, I pursued a journey of learning and development. So one, it was for my own personal and professional development, but furthermore, it was to add credibility to my role as a clinical informatician. It was to improve the quality of my own work and the work that the teams that I'm involved with deliver. And I also wanted to be able to share what I learn with peers and other colleagues as well. Moving on to the how, so I drew inspiration from Boyatz's theory of self-directed learning, in which the author talks about reflecting on who one is, where they want to be and who they want to be, so the ideal self, identifying and thinking about their own strengths, reflecting on gaps, and then creating a learning agenda to build on strengths and reduce the gaps in learning. So how? So in 2019, I applied for the NHS Digital Academy Cohort 3. I was unsuccessful in my application. Initially, I was a bit disappointed, but then I reached out to people on Twitter, on social media, and was very fortunate to receive encouragement and ideas from a lot of people that motivated me to think about my own learning and development. I went on to review various competency frameworks that had already been published to help me think about what skills a clinical informatician requires as part of their day job. It's important to note at this point in time, the FCI competency framework hadn't yet been published, so I was still looking for other resources that had been published. I also drew inspiration from the application booklet that the Digital Academy had published, in which they talk about the 6 core learning modules. I reviewed the application booklet and was able to break down the 6 core learning modules into sub-themes. And then I reflected on those sub-themes and linked them to certain aspects of work-based learning and other postgraduate learning courses that I had been part of, and I was able to identify where my strengths were and areas for further development or gaps in my learning. I went on to research and review various taught programs which varied in content, varied in their structure and mode of delivery, varied in cost, and I debated which course may suit my needs best. I also looked at a range of programs that the NHS Leadership Academy provide. Again, these courses and programs varied in their content and structure. I looked at various BCS course offerings, and the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management has a range of resources as well that I considered as part of my learning. I found the HFMA Academy as a really good resource for personal development and learning. A lot of the resources that the HFMA provide are free or discounted for NHS staff. But at the end of the day, considering my own personal circumstances and the requirement for a flexible approach to learning, I decided to go with the massive open online course as a mode of learning. edX, Coursera, and FutureLearn were my preferred resources. I went on to create my own learning agenda, which covered a range of topics. Some of them were the softer skills required to be a clinical informatician, things like negotiation, influencing people, team working, but also some of the more conceptual and factual aspects of clinical informatics. I supplemented my learning by conference attendances, Rewired, HET, and the virtual summer school were great sources of learning. The webinars from FCI, from Digital Health, from HTN newspaper, again, were great sources of learning. Digital Health Discourse, again, was a great source of learning with commentary and learning opportunities from more experienced colleagues and peers. Judicious use of social media, again, was a great source of learning, along with BMJ journals. A lot of this learning was also supplemented by experiential and work-based learning, especially in the setting of COVID, with the requirement for agile development, stakeholder engagement, and sort of business intelligence and data science and clinical safety. That sort of contributed to my learning as well. And along the way, sort of sharing learning with other forums, including the Shuri network, and being in a position to share learning with the Flexible Portfolio training that we have at Blackpool. That was a great way of building my learning. So the next steps for me, I'm currently doing an advanced certificate in personal effectiveness and leadership with the HFMA. I'm hoping to be part of the Reciprocal Mentoring for Inclusion program, which is an NHS Leadership Academy initiative that our trust has been successful for in their application. I'm considering my application to the next cohort of the Digital Academy. I'm looking forward to the faculty's scientific conference, which is a couple of weeks away, and also looking forward to virtual summer school in a couple of months' time. I'm also quite keen to avail of the opportunities that the faculty provides in terms of coaching and mentoring opportunities. I think I still have a lot to learn from more experienced colleagues in clinical informatics. Along with all of that, I'm quite keen to create an e-portfolio for myself, linking my learning courses, reflective practice, to an e-portfolio, linking that to the 6 domains that are laid out in the faculty's competency framework, also linking that into the 4 domains of good medical practice, which will help me with my annual appraisal and will help with my continuing learning cycle. Lastly, I think it was in March, it was a faculty's webinar, and one of our colleagues, Ewan, said that the more you realize you know, the more you realize that you don't know as well. So I want to carry on with the same attitude and appetite of continual learning. I want to apply my learning into practice on a day-to-day basis in the opportunities that I have in clinical informatics at my trust. I want to continue to share my experiences with colleagues, and I do want to reflect more on my learnings. Lastly, this is a picture of Michelangelo. So Michelangelo started painting the Sistine Chapel when he was 25 years old. He finished painting it when he was 33. He died at the age of 88. But when he was 87, he's got a famous quote which translates to, "I am still learning." And I think we should all sort of draw inspiration from that attitude of aspiring to continually learn and improve ourselves. That's all from me. I've listed a couple of links which will be available as part of the recording. Thank you. I'll hand back to Tejal now.
Thanks very much, Gurkaran. That's such an amazingly structured approach to learning, plus your message at the end that we all have to keep learning is truly the right thing that we all are doing and should continue to do. A quick question before we come back to you at the end. How do you look out for these resources? Do you search actively on Google? Do you have networks you speak with. How do you find out about these resources? So many resources that you have already looked at.
Yeah, all I can say is thank God for Google. I thought that was the easiest way to look for resources. But again, the blogs from previous candidates who have been part of the Digital Academy were very useful as well. People have been kind enough to share their experiences on social media via blogs. And through networks as well, informal and formal networks, there's a whole range of places that people can go and look for sources for learning and development.
Sounds good. Great, Gurkaran. Thanks very much. We'll come back to you at the end. So our next speaker now is Ramandeep Kaur. She's the lead electronic prescribing and medicines administration pharmacist at Barking, Havering and Redbridge University Hospitals. She has an interesting and an amazing journey as well into becoming a clinical informatician. She's also a member at the FCI. So Ramandeep, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tejal, for the introduction. Hopefully everyone can see my slides.
Yeah.
My name is Ramandeep Kaur, as Tejal kindly mentioned, and I'm working currently at Barking, Havering and Redbridge University Hospitals NHS Trust as their lead EPMA pharmacist. Today's presentation will discuss the route that I never imagined I would take, and within this, the aims are to tell you about the reasons for taking those routes, how I progressed my learning, what I have done in the digital field, and my experiences and challenges, and my next steps for learning, and a few pearls of wisdom. So why clinical informatics? In all honesty, when I qualified in 2012, I never imagined I would be in the digital field as a career. It wasn't something widely advertised on your radar as a trainee pharmacist. Upon qualifying, I worked at Leeds Teaching Hospitals for a year and then went to medical school in 2013, and that experience completely changed my life. That year gave me an opportunity to learn about me as a person and develop, and my first take-home point for all of you listening is never fear in discovering who you are and what you want. Life is a lifelong learning process. So then I saw an advert for an EPMA specialist pharmacist post at Leicester Hospitals and applied as I loved computers, and it was something that I thought I would do short term as a stepping stone to becoming a chief pharmacist. I'd set a very clear path in my mind of when I would achieve certain hospital grades by, and wanted to be a chief pharmacist by the time I was 40. I'm really inquisitive as a person and really curious, and I always ask why. And that's another take-home point, is never fear in asking why. And as per the Einstein quote on my screen, the digital world was fast evolving, and it was a space that I wanted to learn more about. However, if only I knew now what I knew back then, how my thoughts, perceptions, and life has changed so much from those initial goals. So roll on to 2016, and I actually realised I absolutely loved digital and informatics, and this is what I wanted to do as a career, and it was no longer something short term. And I recall presenting a vancomycin poster at CPC in 2016 and listening to people talk about the world of digital and feeling inspired. So my second take-home point on your learning and development journey is to take the time to listen and network with others, but also on what you want to achieve, and think about that process. So at Leicester Hospitals, the team on the left in the picture are a fundamental part of the reason why I chose a career in digital. Our breadth of skills and knowledge and MDT approach was inspiring. And whilst I was there, I was part of a team who rolled out EPMA in 100 to 120 clinical areas in a year from 2018 to 2019, and you can all appreciate the amount of learning and development in that exercise in itself in a year was phenomenal. A colleague and a friend gave me this book in the middle of the screen called The Art of Being Brilliant many years ago, and this book talks about not changing who you are, but finding out what works for you and doing it brilliantly. And this resonates with me and my ambition and drive to now keep learning
and taking the opportunities to grow and develop in the field of digital innovation and clinical informatics. So now I'm the lead pharmacist at BHRUT for EPMA and the EPMA project manager, and also involved in a number of other pharmacy IT projects. So one could question, considering I've done an EPMA post before, what else is there to learn related to EPMA? But I can reassure you that learning is something that happens daily, and currently I'm acquiring new skills related to the procurement of clinical systems, which is one aspect of being a clinical informatician and something that is also alluded to in the FCI competency framework. So the journey hasn't always been easy, and progressing your own learning is challenging. I applied for the Chief Pharmaceutical Fellowship Scheme and the FCI back in its infancy, but I was unsuccessful. And at that point, I could have given up, but I took the steps to persevere and develop my skills and expertise by submitting abstracts related to EPMA to conferences, undertaking an MSc in Leadership and Innovation, and writing about EPMA implementation in my dissertation. This gave me an opportunity to learn about research methods and carry out research on a larger scale and explore data further, which is a fundamental part of clinical informatics and digital innovation. I'm yet to attend a face-to-face digital summer school, however, did attend last year's virtual one, and it was a great experience for networking and meeting others. And last year, I was successful in my second FCI application to become a member. And I know Joe's on the call, and I was absolutely elated to receive that email. And it's actually Joe's last day. So I can only thank Joe for that when I received that email. I would really strongly recommend to those starting in the clinical informatics field to sign up as an associate with the FCI and even look at the FCI mentoring scheme. I'm currently a mentor with the RPS, and I have a mentor who is have a mentee, who is an EPMA pharmacist at another organisation. But I also have a mentor in the corporate sector with a large digital company, and for me, this is an opportunity and another way to develop my own learning, but also to give back to others. So my experiences. So for me, the patients and staff are at the heart of everything I do. I've held several roles in the digital field across 2 organisations. I'm undertaking the Digital Health London Pioneer Fellowship currently, and it has been a great way to meet others and learn about digital innovation projects in the country. I'm also doing the Prince 2 course, which has allowed me to learn about project management theory in line with Domain 6 of the FCI framework. And alongside being an FCI member, I'm a UK CPA board director and a Shuri Network fellow. And I had the privilege of being on the Rising Digital Star panel earlier this year at Digital Health Rewired to discuss clinical software. This was a really humbling experience, but also another opportunity for learning and development. And I'd recommend to colleagues to take the opportunity to attend different digital health conferences where possible to enhance your learning. So for me, my next steps in learning and development is to take the different concepts of the FCI competency framework and align my goals towards the 6 domains. I'm currently involved in the new FCI Pharmacy Professional Interest Group, which kicked off yesterday, and the review of CCIO JDs with the FCI piece of work that's currently undergoing with Lindsay and a few other colleagues. This is a critical piece of work which will also help any budding CCIOs in the future. I'm also offering time for someone to shadow me as part of the Shuri Network shadowing programme, and I'll be shadowing someone as well from NHSX, and no doubt that's a great learning opportunity. I, like Gurkaran, I'm hoping to apply for cohort 4 of the Digital Health Leadership Academy and the new RPS Digital Advisory Group that's been set up. And we'll also be involved in judging some digital health awards later this year. I'm also planning on renewing my MSc findings and formally publishing these. And I would like to say to anyone who is looking at the field of publishing, there is an FCI webinar coming up in May on how to get published, and I would recommend that as another learning opportunity. And my career aspirations are no longer to be a chief pharmacist, but to continue learning and development in the digital field and become a CCIO or a consultant pharmacist in digital innovation and clinical informatics. So this brings me on to my final pearls of wisdom for anyone listening, as there's lots of different routes to progress your learning in this field, and no set route is standard. My route is really unique, and I've built my own set of principles and values for my learning and development. My advice to others is to go and discover those opportunities that are available. Network with others, draw upon their experiences, and help that guide you to share your learning with each other and create a positive culture for learning. Never give up. I could have easily given up a few years ago with the setbacks, but actually take time for self-learning and read through the FCI framework to tailor your individual learning needs. As no doubt we have different interests in the digital field, but also celebrate your successes. Digital transformation is a huge maze, but equally really exciting and a roller coaster of emotions, but it is certainly well worth it. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you to the FCI for this opportunity today to present. I will now hand back to Tejal.
Thanks very much, Ramandeep. Absolutely brilliant, and what a fantastic journey. We'll come back to you again towards the end of this webinar. Before then, we go over to our next speaker, Dr. Justine Rhodes. She specializes in geriatrics and is also on the Flexible Portfolio Training Program in the northeast of England, which means that her pathway is clinical informatics. In fact, she's one of the first cohorts on the FPT program. Over to you, Justine.
Thank you, Tejal. Hopefully you can see the slides. So as Tejal said, my name is Justine Rhodes, and I am an SD4 in geriatrics and also a flexible portfolio trainee. So in terms of what that means, so I'm a junior doctor in the northeast of England, a medical registrar, and my clinical informatics experience, I'm quite new to this, and that's all via the Flexible Portfolio Training Programme. And I was part of cohort 1, which started last year back in August of 2019. So in terms of my route into informatics, as I say, that is through the Flexible Portfolio Training Programme. And just to tell people a little bit about that, if you're not familiar, that is an initiative that was put together between the Royal College of Physicians and also Health Education England. And the aim was to improve the morale amongst medical registrars and also to try and increase recruitment and improve retention of medical registrars into underfilled specialties, particularly those that are dual accrediting specialties, which means we contribute to the general medicine on-call take. In terms of the programme, it's running throughout England and Wales, and in the northeast, the option is to do some clinical informatics alongside my normal training, and that's the same in Wessex and the northwest as well. In other areas of the UK, there are other options, and that would be medical research, quality improvement, or teaching. And the idea was that potentially over time you might be able to choose one of those options, but for now it's set within the region you're in, and up here in the northeast that was for clinical informatics. In terms of what that means for me and my daily life, I spend 20% of my time doing clinical informatics, which means 1 day a week. And the rest of the time I'm doing my normal specialty training, but I still contribute to the on-call rota as a kind of full-time trainee, or 100% of the on-call rota. And so they get that use out of me at the same time. In terms of why I chose this route, to be completely honest, I didn't know there was another route into it. And I think my route is certainly a lot more structured than the other two speakers we've heard from, and probably from a lot of people who are already involved in informatics. So we were sent an email when I applied for registrar training to say this new training programme is being set up. Is anybody interested? Get in touch. And you know, very quickly I signed up for it with very little knowledge really of what clinical informatics actually was. But my basis for going into it and jumping straight in was, I do think that technology is something that we probably underutilize or do not utilize in the ways that could be achieved, I suppose, and it could be something that could be improved. I think I look for an opportunity to just do something a little bit different, and that probably shows through my career progress so far. I've taken time out to do simulation teaching and a teaching year and things like that. But mainly I get really annoyed at people grumbling about something, IT systems that don't work or a way of doing things that doesn't work brilliantly, without getting in touch with someone that might be able to change those things. And having met somebody who made a difference very quickly to a simple problem we had as a junior doctor when I was doing my core medical training, I realised that these people exist in trusts, and this gave me the opportunity to go down that route and be able to make a difference in the future. So in terms of the Flexible Portfolio Curriculum, I was given this curriculum to start with that gave me a really good idea of what I needed to achieve and what I needed to learn to be a clinical informatician. And these are the areas that our curriculum covers, and that's a range from simple introductions to what informatics is, what EPRs are, all the way through to how we give empowerment to our patients that allows them to look at things that are out there like wearable tech, how they make decisions about what's safe and the right thing for them, and also for us how to keep an eye on what's coming in the future and how we kind of learn to cover all of these domains as we go through. And I think comparing them, this links up very closely to the Faculty of Clinical Informatics core competency framework, and they marry up quite nicely. So in terms of my experience, I think the first part of last year I spent a lot of time just learning what clinical informatics was and the different aspects. We went on lots of different training days, but one of the most useful things I think was the Newcastle University CPD programme that Tejal was very involved in setting up, and that was a fabulous sort of opportunity to learn from the very basics of a session that just taught us about abbreviations you might hear, what networks are, what APIs are, that sort of thing, all the way through to a really interesting session about blockchain and what that might do in healthcare in the future. And that course last year was run face-to-face, and we had the opportunity to meet lots of people who had a lot more experience in clinical informatics and sort of get that network set up and that mentoring scheme set up just informally, where people could guide us and help us move forward when they heard us talking about little projects or what we were seeing or what we were struggling with. People would point us in the right direction, and they were fabulous at just helping us know where to go next when we felt a little bit stuck. In terms of the projects I've been involved with, last year I was looking at introducing palliative care observations into Nerve Centre instead of News 2 for our patients who are end of life. And this year I've been involved in a number of projects, again, all related to Nerve Centre so far, in terms of adding hospital at night modules, improving weekend discharges and handovers to try and improve our patient care. And we've just started out on a big project in the trust I'm working at the moment, trying to link up our A&E and inpatient stays, and also improve our patient journey and patient flow in terms of having electronic dashboards that show us what needs to be achieved to move our patients to the next step, and to try and speed up how quickly we can achieve things for our patients. And that's a massive project that I'm being able to put some of the practice from the courses I learnt last year and really give it a go in real life, which is the best way of learning, I think. So in terms of my thoughts on clinical informatics and the flexible portfolio training, I've generally found it something really interesting to do with my time. I've been able to learn lots of things that not just help me with my informatics, but also in terms of registrar training, because you get an experience of things like project management, business case writing, how to process map and think about what that means. And it's also the operational insights of attending lots of meetings and seeing how the budgets run, how one project can impact on lots of other things. And again, I think that's a really interesting experience that we often miss out on in terms of our training as junior doctors. And it's given me that experience that will help me throughout my career in all aspects, both the clinical and the informatics side of things. I've particularly enjoyed having the ability to be an advocate for clinical staff, particularly for the junior doctors, who I feel often don't get a voice. They rotate through trusts so often that they're often not involved in these sorts of decisions about clinical informatics, which generally has a big impact on their workload and what they do. And I think FPT really does give us the opportunity to get them involved. I've written that I think it gives me a good work-life balance. I think what I mean by that is that it breaks up my week, and on the days that I'm clinical, I think it allows me to be refreshed and excited about my clinical work, because I get a break from it sometimes to do something different. However, I think I find that I spend a lot of my time out of, when I'm not at work, 0 days, on my days off, doing stuff to do with clinical informatics. I think that's partly because I enjoy it, but partly because I have been able to flex my time around and just fit it in all around. And that's because of how supportive my colleagues have been. A lot of the consultants are really interested in what I do and are quite willing to let me take control of my time and be flexible as long as I'm achieving what I need to achieve. The protected non-clinical time has certainly been helpful, and I've really enjoyed having a small support group of other flexible portfolio trainees, a Topo fellow who had a bit more experience and really pointed us in the right direction at the times last year when I felt I didn't know what I was doing or where to go next. And I think that mentoring and close peer support is so important through this. And that leads me on to a little bit about the challenges. And I think I really struggled last year to find the right contacts in a place that I'd never worked before, with a system I didn't know. And that was made worse by that rotational training pattern. And I think my advice would be, find somebody who knows something in the hospital or area you're working, be that the CCIO's generic email, ask the questions and find somebody who can point you in the right direction. Don't let your shift work get in the way of it. Just be honest about your time, what you've got available when you're on call and busy and when you're not going to be able to help. And get involved as you can, and as long as you're upfront and honest with people, they don't mind. And that, I think, really does help get your foot in the door. Nobody expects you to know everything when you're setting out, or even when you've been doing it for years. There'll always be people around who have the technical experience, or people in other trusts that might have done something who you can ask to help. And again, you'll gain knowledge about systems and processes as you go, but there are lots of opportunities to learn more, and I think some of the links we signpost to later will be helpful for that. So in terms of where I'm going next, I think for me, I really need to gain more experience on the ground, and this project work I'm going through, I've kind of linked up to the core competency framework from the FCI, and I think that really helps me know where I might need to go next. In terms of the flexible portfolio training, I think what's really important to me is to try and support juniors and also encourage future generations into programs like that. I think it gives them an idea of what's available out there if I can talk about it and get more people to know about these things existing. And with time, I'd like to learn, get more experience and then be able to lead projects and gain more experience through the leadership side of things with time. So very briefly, my tips and tricks would be to ask to help, because there are not enough people involved in these things, and I think nobody has enough time to do everything they want to do, and everybody will always appreciate a little bit of help to move things along. If you don't know who the right person to ask is, just ask a few people and keep asking. Don't give up, keep badgering, and someone will help you and be able to move you forward. I think networks are really important. We've got an Informatics in the Pub network up here in the Northeast, and that I find really helpful, because you can put a question to people and there are people with all range of experience who know everything that's happening around the UK, or probably know someone that can, and that can be really helpful. And to everyone, if you're new to this or you've been in it for years, encourage others into it, because we need that breadth and diversity in informaticians to help us improve patient care and systems for the future. Thank you very much for listening. I will hand back over to Tejal. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justine. That was very interesting, and glad that you found the course so useful. Quick question to you. So you mentioned the Informatics in the Pub, and also both the other speakers mentioned the importance of networking or finding mentors. So what would you suggest? How can people set up their own local networks? How does it work? How can you find the resources within your area? Like, for example, Informatics in the Pub is here in the Northeast. So what are your suggestions on how to set up such networks?
So I think you have to put yourself out there a little bit. Where if you go along to training sessions, I know it's harder virtually, but that was a way that I met lots of people, and it's somebody else in the Northeast who set up Informatics in the Pub, but the person who's kind of running that now just adds people every time it gets mentioned to anybody, or you find somebody that's interested. You say, oh, we've got this WhatsApp group and this Informatics in the Pub group that meets every month. Can we get you involved, add you into that? And it, I think, has grown from a couple of people meeting once a month in the pub to have a 10-minute discussion and a drink and something to eat, to a still running virtual online discussion thing where people are presenting what's going on at the moment around, and you have the opportunity to ask questions in it. I think just start small. If there's not a network locally, then set up a group, find a couple of people that are interested, add yourselves to a WhatsApp group, and every time you meet somebody who has a small interest, ask them if they want to get involved and build your group out from that. There are probably other groups that are existing in your area, and I think that's where, if you go along to these sorts of training days, or you meet on online forums or whatever, ask people if they have groups and that you can get involved with, and just try and set those things up and expand them, because the more people can discuss with each other, the better opportunities we have to learn, and the more you probably realise we don't need to start from scratch every time anybody wants to do something. There's probably someone who's done it before or knows how to do it, and you can at least learn from their mistakes, even if you don't want to copy it completely. I think that would be my advice.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Justine. That's very helpful. And as you said, the Informatics in the Pub is growing and people keep getting added. So if anyone on this call would like to join, probably they can get in touch with us. I guess, would that be correct? And,
absolutely, and we can certainly get them added.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Justine. Ramandeep, coming back to you, you mentioned that you attended the digital summer school, but only, you attended, I may have misnamed that, but you attended one of the training courses virtually, and you're looking forward to meeting the people over there. So following on from that, and following on from how the last year has been with everything going virtual, what is the learning style that you actually prefer, and why would that be? Like, would you prefer virtual, face-to-face, or other tips and hints that you may have in how you should progress with learning about clinical informatics?
Thank you, Tejal, for the question. I agree. I think no one really ever anticipated we'd be in a pandemic, and having to, for me personally, a hybrid approach is definitely preferable. It would have been fantastic to have been able to attend digital summer school face to face, but being able to do that last year virtually, and hopefully this year virtually, still gives me an opportunity, I guess, to experience that. And listen to people, but also not necessarily having to take, I know it's really difficult for people to take 2 to 3 days possibly away from their jobs, their day-to-day jobs, and actually being able to dip in and dip out of conferences is quite nice when it's virtual. So a bit like the DH Rewired that was 5 days long in March, it was fantastic. There were lots of great speakers, but actually I know none of us probably can take 5 days out of our clinical services as well that we offer. So for me personally, a hybrid approach of being able to have both is great. And I look forward, however, to the opportunities of being able to meet people face to face again and being able to have that discussion, because I think that human interaction that can't really be replaced by a virtual screen, no matter how much engagement you do try to create virtually. There is still that, there's something different about meeting personally, from my perspective anyway.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Ramandeep. And that ties into the whole theme that we should network, we should learn from each other. I think there is something in face-to-face settings that we gain that is missed out in the virtual setting. That's very interesting. Thanks, Ramandeep. Gurkaran, coming back to you, you have been doing a lot of courses that have helped with your learning and development. And I note that you mentioned a lot on edX and Coursera. I'm assuming they would be virtual, but has there been anything different since COVID has struck, and how has that impacted on how you learn and develop in this space?
Thanks, Tejal. So I think, yeah, with COVID, finding the time to learn, that was a challenge. So balancing clinical commitments with personal development and learning, that was difficult to balance with COVID, and ensuring that I had enough downtime as well to be in a fit and ready state to care for people. That was a challenge. The virtual flexible environment that MOOCs provide helped with the learning. So it was self-paced learning, which I found quite useful. I agree with you, and I agree with Ramandeep that, yeah, in an ideal world, in a non-pandemic affected world, the hybrid approach is ideal for learning. A lot of the conferences are recorded as well. This webinar is being recorded, so it allows people to learn in their own time. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Gurkaran. Does anyone have a question? Or I have a few more. If no one here has. Something that I would like to ask all the speakers, that what would you have done differently if you had the knowledge that you have now, the experience that you have now, and what would you recommend those on this call who might be beginning their journey as clinical informaticians? Do you want to start, someone, or should I just call out? Maybe Ramandeep, do you want to start?
Okay, I'll go first. What would I do differently? To be honest, if somebody had mentioned back, so I think if we're talking about learning and development, which is the focal point of today's webinar, actually putting, and for me being a pharmacist, putting that into our undergraduate training. So actually, you know, bringing these digital concepts right the way back down to that learning from the grassroots, because I think that's absolutely fundamental. Because I never knew that this route existed. And that's certainly something that I think for anybody who's aspiring to be in this digital field, or is actually sat in university and learning, going through their 4 or 5 years of training, it would be fantastic to know that these opportunities exist. So that's definitely something that I think would be great. And I'm sure having done the first year of medical school, again, back then you didn't know that there was a field in digital, but also, you know, taking what Justine and Gurkaran have done, it's amazing to hear about their journeys and how they've combined their clinical work and the digital work together. So I'm sure that resonates across the different healthcare professions.
Thanks very much, Ramandeep. Justine, do you have?
I think what I would, well, I suppose we did state last year a little bit about how we might have found it easier to get into this, and that was with the brilliant course you set up. We were like trying to bring it forward in the year for our training, because I think we spent a few months feeling like we were treading water and not really sure how we could be helpful to anybody. And not necessarily understanding exactly what was going on around us. And I think for a lot of people, informatics, as you say, is something that is completely new to them, Randeep, and we haven't yet encased it in your training. That means that when you arrive on the job, you understand what on earth it even means. And I think by bringing that opportunity down, I agree, would be really helpful, and kind of meaning that people have some understanding when they come into the job. But for me, having got some on sort of learning as early as possible might have meant that I would have been more willing to kind of volunteer for things and give things a go. And I've certainly found that this year I've changed how easily I will put my hand up and go, I will give that a go. Can I write that? Can I do the process map? Can I do this, that and the other? Because I know that it doesn't have to be perfect. It might be the first time I've ever done something, but I've got to bit of knowledge of what that means or where to find the information about it. And I'm very happy to go back to somebody with a draft and say, right, help me make this better. How would you have done it? Help me do it better next time. And this year I felt a lot more confident with that, I think, because of the grounding you gave us last year. And I think the earlier you can pull that grounding forward so that people can start getting involved, the better. And I'm trying to pull some of our more junior doctors, foundation doctors, IMT doctors into focus groups and bits to do on the project I'm involved with at the moment, to show them that this sort of thing exists and to maybe spike some interest as young as possible to help them potentially move into it earlier in their careers than even I have.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justine. Just start doing it. That's the message. Get going. Gurkaran, what would be your advice?
Yeah, so if I were to do things differently, I think I'd do 3 things differently. So one would be reflect more on who I am, who and what I aspire to be. That helps with identifying gaps in learning. 2 would be, like Justine has said, reach out and try and be more involved. If I had my time again, I would have tried to be more involved in the faculty's competency framework working group, be more involved with other colleagues in initiatives that they have been involved with. And lastly, I would say I would have chosen sources of advice more wisely. I think there are a lot of people there to give advice. But it depends on you to sort of filter out the wisdom from the noise as well, and sort of tailor your learning needs to yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Ramandeep. Sorry, Gurkaran. That's brilliant. And I agree with the FCI's competency framework. It has such wealth of information that reading through it does give you an idea of what to pursue, where your interests may lie. So definitely. Thanks very much. Thank you, all of you, Gurkaran, Ramandeep, and Justine. It was absolutely fantastic, as you can see from the comments as well. Our guests enjoyed your lectures too. So I will hand back to Lindsay. Lindsay, if you would like to conclude. Thanks. Sorry, Lindsay, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Trying to find the unmute button when I'm sharing a screen at the same time. Thank you, Tejal, and thank you to all of our speakers today for your, such fascinating insights and really valuable information to share with everyone who might be in a similar position to you somewhere along their journeys. I just wanted to give a flavour of the sorts of things that are going on in the faculty linked to the things that have been discussed today. You'll know that the competency framework's been mentioned lots of times, but these are some of the things that are in the pipeline for us. We're working on developing an evidence portfolio so that our members are able to link their experience to the competency framework, and in the future that will allow people to come into faculty membership through a portfolio-based approach. We also offer CPD accreditation of courses, and we'll be linking that to our competency framework so that we're able to offer a database of accredited courses. We want to expand the way that we make education and training, the way that we signpost those and give career support on our website. And just to let you know that we have mentoring available, which I think as well some of our speakers mentioned today. And we'll be looking to develop our own learning resources to meet the needs of our members as well in the future. So just again to thank everyone today. There will be a recording on our website if you came in late or you just want to pick up on anything again. We will email around a list of the resources that were mentioned today. Our speakers have really kindly provided the links to everything that they've mentioned, and we'll make sure the slides are available. If you have a question that you haven't been able to ask today, do get in touch with that and we'll try to get back to you. We have a series of webinars coming up, so look out for those on our website and sign up if you're interested. And the link for our evaluation form is in the chat chat. It's just a couple of minutes. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of feedback, that really helps us to plan sessions in the future around what is of most interest to you. If anyone's joined today who isn't already a member and wants to find out more about the faculty, then do go to our website. Again, there's a link in the chat. So thank you very much for all of your time and for joining us today.